Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining the discussion and report launching Scaling Up Solar in Indonesia, Reform and Opportunity. This report jointly produced by BloombergNEF, Bloomberg Philanthropies, and Institute for Essential Services Reform. Please allow me, Uliasisi Simanjuntak, IESR Communication Teams, gives you some housekeeping for the event. We will conduct this event in bilingual, English and Indonesia. For those who participating in the Zoom application, we provide you a simultaneous translation service. To activate this feature, please click on the globe logo or the interpretation menu that's available in the bottom right corner of your application. If you are watching live on our YouTube channel, IESR Indonesia, you will hear only the original audio as it in online discussion. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat siang dan salam sejahtera bagi kita semua. Terima kasih Bapak Ibu yang sudah bergabung dalam diskusi dan peluncuran kajian Scaling Up Solar in Indonesia, Reform and Opportunity. Kajian ini merupakan kerjasama antara BloombergNEF, Bloomberg Philanthropies, dan Institute for Essential Services Reform. Izinkan saya, Uliasisi Simanjuntak, tim komunikasi IESR, menyampaikan beberapa tata tertib selama pelaksanaan kegiatan. Kegiatan ini berlangsung dalam dua bahasa, yakni Inggris dan Indonesia. Kami menyediakan layanan penerjemah secara simultan untuk Anda yang mengikuti webinar di aplikasi Zoom. Untuk mengaktifkan fitur ini, silakan klik logo bola dunia atau globe atau menu interpretasi yang ada tersedia di bawah sudut kanan aplikasi Anda. Jika Anda menonton secara langsung di saluran YouTube kami, Anda hanya akan mendengarkan audio asli sebagaimana diskusi berlangsung. Please rename your name by format name _institution/organization. If you would like to ask a question to one of the speakers during the webinar, please write down your question in the chat box and please state to whom your question is addressed. During the meeting, participant microphone will be disabled. We kindly request all participants to register your participation in the link we informed you about in the chat box. You can access this event on IESR Indonesia YouTube channel or please click the link we sent in the chat box. Presentation material will be published at the end of the event at s.id/solarreform. If you encounter technical problem or have any question on how to use Zoom and its features, you can contact our event organizer. All right, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I pass this microphone to our MC, Malaysia Chicken. Platform is yours.
Thank you, Uli. Ladies and gentlemen, hello. My name is Marlisda Citrandingrum, and I'll be your host for today. So, Indonesia's power emission holds the key to increase the country's climate ambition in reducing the greenhouse gas emission. Pointing to the draft of the Grand National Energy Strategy released late last year, the government has targeted 38 gigawatts of new and renewable energy by 2035, effectively making solar PV a priority. Globally, the technology has become the most effective solution to reach net zero emission target by 2050, weighing the lower investment cost and also its democratic, accessible characteristic. Solar energy would also be key in decarbonizing Indonesia's energy system, and at the same time providing means for sustainable and economic growth. It also requires strong commitment and well-prepared plans, including identification of feasible projects and satisfactory implementation. Let's hear the remarks on this matter from Minister of Energy and Mineral Resources, the Honorable Arifin Tasrif.
Akselerasi transformasi energi menjadi komitmen pemerintah untuk mendukung green economy, green technology, dan green product sejalan dengan pelaksanaan Paris Agreement. Energi surya akan menjadi andalan dalam strategi energi terbarukan untuk mendorong pencapaian net zero emission di tahun 2060 atau lebih cepat mengingat potensinya yang besar dan harganya yang semakin kompetitif. Pemerintah mendukung inisiatif yang dilakukan oleh berbagai pihak untuk mendorong percepatan pemanfaatan tenaga surya.
Thank you, Minister Arifin Tasrif, especially for the continuing commitment to renewable energy advancements in Indonesia. Next, we will have several keynote speakers. For the first one, joining us from the United States, Ailun Yang, Head of International Programs, Climate and Environment, Bloomberg Philanthropies. I'm inviting her to share her views on energy transition and Bloomberg Philanthropies work. Please, Ailun.
Thank you, everybody, for joining today's event. My name is Ailun. I work at Bloomberg Philanthropies. It is my great honor to present you this report. I thank all of the researchers who put a lot of hard work into it. I know that you all cannot wait to hear about the report and also the discussions, but let me just say a few words about why Bloomberg Philanthropies think this is such an important initiative. At Bloomberg Philanthropy, our mission is to ensure the better, longer life for the greatest number of people. Naturally, climate change is a big part of what we do. Mike Bloomberg, in his capacity as the UN Special Envoy for Climate Actions and Solutions, we work around the world to promote climate change solutions, especially clean air transition solutions. Indonesia is one of our priority countries. We believe solar power is part of the climate solution. It brings a lot of benefits, reduce the emission, cut the local pollution, create jobs, and also drive clean energy economic development. That's why it's such a pity to see Indonesia as benefit from so much solar resources. Right now, only is using 1% of your resources. We're very happy to be part of this initiative with leading experts globally and also from Indonesia to talk about how we might increase this industry in Indonesia. Without further delay, I will present the researcher from this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Ailun. Also, thanks for staying late for us. And we're really excited to hear more about how Indonesia could tap into this massive solar energy potential and how we can grow the initiative together. Right. I will now hand the platform to John Moore, Chief Executive Officer, BloombergNEF, to highlight the importance of this joint report and what it actually means for Indonesia. Please, John.
Thank you very much, and it's great to be here and glad everybody could join. And special thanks to our partners at IESR for working with us and Bloomberg Philanthropies to produce this report. I actually lived in Jakarta from 93 to 95, so I have a special place in my heart for Indonesia. So selamat siang for everybody who's there. Saya bisa sedikit bahasa Indonesia. So I'll speak in English rather than bahasa, but it really is great to be here. And I think sort of now is a great time to be having this discussion. We really are entering, I think, a net zero era. In January 2020, about a third of emissions were covered by some form of government commitment or discussion around net zero. That number, despite the pandemic, is now 70%. So 70% of the world's emissions are under some form of discussion or commitment around net zero. So it really is a new era we're entering. And we don't just need the IPCC report, although that was very valuable just to remind us why decarbonization is so important. But we can see from the climate literally that's happening around the world today, from hurricanes and floods and fires, that this is really an important thing to really focus on right now. The good news is technology costs keep coming down. So actually a lot of these clean technologies really are the cheapest. So, wind and solar is the cheapest for 2/3 of the world's population, which is about 77% of GDP and over 90% of generation. So if people are choosing the cheapest technologies, then renewables really must be very, very high on the list. And of course, solar. So with wind, solar, and batteries, really those are the things that will work together. Solar really is absolutely key. It's cheap, it's clean. Being distributed, I think, will be fantastic news for Indonesia. Indonesia is a very distributed country, so having providing energy access across the many islands, I think, will be a great benefit. And it's a new industry, so it's a whole new employer, it's a whole new technology to really for Indonesia really to build on. So huge opportunity too. But finally, it's year of COP26. So I think between now and November, so sort of 2 more months, I think you're going to see, more commitments, more discussion, and hopefully this report can really help inform the debate in India, in Indonesia, and also as you engage with other participants around the globe. So I hope you enjoy the report, and thank you very much. Terima kasih, and I'll hand over. Thank you.
Okay, terima kasih, John. Your bahasa Indonesia is very good. And also, I like how you called it, we must embrace the net zero era. And I hope that Indonesia could also be the dominant player for solar energy in the region, starting hopefully today. To close and to draw even more attention on how solar energy becomes the prime mover of energy transition in Indonesia, please welcome Fabi Tumiwa, the Executive Director of Institute for Essential Services Reform, or IESR.
Thank you, and good day to all of you. There's good morning, good afternoon, good evening, very late night for Ailun in New York. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of IESR, I would like to thank Bloomberg Philanthropies, Bloomberg New Energy Finance for making our report successfully launched today. Indonesia is actually at the beginning of the energy transitions. And our president has announced that the country to reach decarbonization by 2060 or sooner. And I understand that as we speak today, that all ministers, all government officials that in charge for this plan are working intensively to deliver this goal. So this report is very timely, and it suits our need. And this report explores the possibilities for solar power to become a contributor to Indonesia endeavor to deploy renewable energy and reaching a zero emission energy sector aligned with the Paris Agreement goal. As a country, we have the vision to utilize our vast renewable energy, but our energy policies in the past has become a hostage of also reach our coal resources. And 4 years is actually very hard for renewables to compete with the cheap and abundant electricity from coal. But we could expect a change soon. And as the global community is making effort to avoid climate crisis, this has leveraged global attempt to embark on energy transitions. The cost of renewable energy technology has dropped significantly, and that makes renewable on par and even in some area cheaper than fossil fuel generation, including coal. Solar energy plays important role in making this energy transformation fast and cost effective. And Indonesia has more than enough solar energy resources. IESR study indicated that Indonesia could generate between 3.6 terawatt to 20 terawatt solar power. Reaching zero emission of the entire energy sector by 2050 only required less than 4% of total land mass covered with solar PV, is coupled with energy storage, of course. As the cost of investment dropped 90% since a decade ago and expected to drop further, solar can generate low-cost electricity to make electricity affordable for all people in Indonesia. Our energy law has set to meet 23% renewable energy target by 2025. And within 4 years' time left, solar energy actually can help to meet this target. Solar can be deployed at large scale, but also because of the uniqueness of this technology, solar can mobilize people participation what we call gotong royong in Indonesia, to meet this renewable energy target and emission reduction goal. So with solar, we are not rely on investment from big business or the utilities, but people itself also can participate in delivering the renewable energy. So we hope this report can share light on our policymakers, developer, investor, and utility on necessary reform to take place to harness the nature ultimate power to spur energy transition in Indonesia. Finally, I would like to thank to Minister of Energy and Mineral Resources for his support on this report, and also the DG Renewable Energy and Energy Conservation, and all panelists that present today. And especially, I would like to thank to Ailun Yang and Ray Luo from Bloomberg, and the BNEF team, as well as my dear colleague from IESR, that working very hard to make this report be available today. Thank you and enjoy the report.
Thank you. Terima kasih, Fabi. I especially like the remarks on we, the people, have the power, being that people everywhere can generate their own electricity, and how solar energy will be the answer to the energy democracy and meeting Indonesia's renewable energy target. All right, up for the next session, Bloomberg Philanthropies and BloombergNEF in collaboration with IESR produced this report to provide a clear solar PV landscape in Indonesia and how to scale up its progress. The report focuses on solar PV's growing role to decarbonize Indonesia's power system, the billions of investment needed, and the reform to raise our solar ambition beyond 2025. Present here today with us, Caroline Chua, Senior Associate, Southeast Asia, BloombergNEF, and the author of this report, who will walk us through the report and what's in it. Please, Caroline.
Thank you. Good morning and good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Caroline Chua, and on behalf of the BloombergNEF, IESR, and Bloomberg Philanthropies team, I'll be sharing an overview of our report, Scaling Up Solar in Indonesia. And I hope my screen is visible to all of you. So as many of the speakers previously mentioned, decarbonization discussions globally have been on the rise this year in the lead up to COP26 happening in Glasgow in November. In Indonesia as well, there have been increasing the decarbonization discussions and public pledges to undertake change at unprecedented levels, including the adoption of a net zero aspiration by 2060 or sooner. And through this presentation and the report, we'll be sharing some of our findings on the main barriers for solar development and the reforms required to unlock Indonesia's solar potential and opportunities. Today, Indonesia is among the top 10 carbon emitters globally, and hence the country is critical to the global decarbonization story. Total 2018 greenhouse gas emissions stood at 542 million tons of CO2, of which the electricity and heat sector is the single largest contributor to emissions in Indonesia at 40%. Hence, the power sector will be an important piece to address in Indonesia's low carbon transition. Currently, fossil fuel dominates the electricity supply at 85% of installed capacity, particularly coal, which accounts for more than half. Meanwhile, Indonesia's renewable energy resources, such as wind, solar, and geothermal, remain largely underutilized. And as many of the speakers have mentioned as well, Indonesia has a short-term renewable energy target that is to have 23% of renewable energy in its primary energy mix by 2025. In the power sector, this requires a 50% to almost a doubling of renewable energy generation over the next 4 years alone, which can be met by installing 18 to 33 gigawatts of solar. And this level of solar build will require an estimated 14.4 to 26.4 billion in investments. Energy policies in Indonesia have traditionally favored and focused on the rich domestic coal resources, making coal the technology of choice for new generation capacities over the last decade. And we also see that although Indonesia undertook significant reforms of its power and petroleum subsidies over 2014 to 2017, the government still provides considerable fossil fuel support, which rose 27% between 2017 and 2019. And this increase has largely been driven by subsidized retail energy prices. And as a result, historical investments in renewable energy has been low, largely limited to bioenergy projects, and in the last decade, almost entirely to geothermal projects. Wind and solar investments to date are almost negligible, and stock capacity for both technologies are reported to be less than 200 megawatts each. Now, I mentioned earlier that meeting Indonesia's 2025 target in the power sector will require a build of at least 18 gigawatts of solar, and that amounts to a 100-fold increase in solar capacity from the 154 megawatts installed today. And this may sound like an ambitious target, but solar's quick deployment time makes it feasible. Just to share an example, we witnessed this in neighboring country Vietnam, who installed almost 19 gigawatts of solar over the last 2 years alone. So solar is the most economic clean energy technology that Indonesia can rapidly deploy. So despite the short time frame of just 4 years, Indonesia's 2025 renewable energy target can be achieved with solar. And the economic case for solar is also getting stronger. So solar is set to be cheaper than a new coal plant by 2022, so that's next year, and its cost is expected to decline over the next few decades. By around 2040, we also expect that a new solar plant is competitive against an existing coal plant. This means building new solar can help to meet growing power demand while keeping electricity tariffs in Indonesia affordable. As part of the report, we also took a look at the economics of PV and storage. And while that is still costly today, it is already cost competitive against diesel generators, whose generation cost can go up to $200 per megawatt hour in rural areas. And by 2027, we expect that a PV and storage system sized at 25% of its capacity could undercut the generation cost of the new coal plant. So this makes PV and storage an economic choice for applications such as rural electrification or in regions currently powered by diesel to support the government's diesel replacement program. And this is not just an estimation on paper. Even with relatively little deployment in the market today, the cost decline of solar is already being reflected in actual solar tariffs and auction bids in Indonesia. And based on signed PPAs, we have seen a 76% decline in solar tariffs since 2015. And if we look at the auction bids that are pending award, this goes up to an 85% decline since 2015. So even on the ground, the economic benefit of solar is already coming through. So the solar potential in Indonesia is large, but government action and market reforms are needed to unlock this opportunity. In this report, we have identified 6 main areas of reform required. And through this presentation today, I'll highlight some of the main points. And the first is the need for a well-established renewable energy target and long-term decarbonization target. Indonesian government has set a long-term net zero aspirations and for net zero by 2060 or sooner. And although this is not yet legislated, achieving this target will rely heavily on deploying solar to reduce the country's reliance on fossil fuel power generation. So concrete policy commitments such as turning targets into reality, finalizing the coal moratorium or carbon pricing that are under discussion can accelerate the pace of decarbonization and attract investors into the market. And under the recently shared Draft Electricity Business Supply Plan, or locally known as the RUPTL 2021 in Indonesia, solar target has increased to 6 gigawatts from less than a gigawatt under the 2019 plan, but this could still be more ambitious. Next, it is also critical for the government to address the current oversupply situation in many of Indonesia's power grids. So years of overly optimistic demand forecast, which is shown through the colored lines on the chart, has failed to materialize. And this has led to a surplus of generation capacity on the country's main power grids, primarily driven by an early overbuild of coal-fired power plants. While monitoring for new coal plants is already under discussion and consideration, the country still plans to move ahead with the coal capacity it previously approved. So the first and most obvious step Indonesia can do to lessen the current oversupply situation from worsening further is to stop adding more fossil fuel power generating assets. Any future growth in power demand can likely be met economically with clean energy sources such as solar. And surveyed stakeholders that we spoke to through the research for this report shared that solar development is currently hindered by several regulatory challenges. So it is necessary to level the playing field. For example, the current power purchase tariff regulations force solar projects to compete with subsidized coal power. There's also onerous local content regulations to meet, given the lack of maturity and skill in the local supply chain. So reforms such as lifting this local content regulations and requirements, removing subsidies for coal-fired power, lifting payment caps on payments to renewable energy projects can help to accelerate solar adoption in the local market. And despite the challenges, interest in Indonesia's solar sector remains high, both from domestic and international investors. And in the report, we tracked close to 3 gigawatts of announced solar project pipeline in the country that could result in an estimated $2.9 billion in investment. A clearly defined, stable, and transparent long-term solar procurement program can help these projects to materialize and encourage growth of the local supply chain. And other factors, such as having a standardized power purchase contract, could also help to shorten the negotiation and development timeline, giving more certainty to projects. Indonesia's power market today is still highly regulated, including the electricity retail prices, which are subsidized and lower than most countries in the region and internationally. And this artificially erodes the economic case for solar and reduces the incentives for commercial and industrial customers to install renewables. So market reforms, such as looking at the way that tariffs are set, raising tariffs to reflect full generation costs, will enable solar to compete on a true economic basis in the country and allow the least cost solution to be put forth and help to keep tariffs low in Indonesia. And last but not least, Indonesia desires to grow its manufacturing sectors. One example, the Indonesian government is trying to leverage its nickel resources to take a strategic position in the global EV battery manufacturing supply chain. A quarter of the nickel resources are located in Indonesia, and the country is competitive in low-cost industrial and manufacturing conditions, such as electricity tariffs. And as of 2020, investment announcement plans into the sector totaled $22 billion. But Indonesia's carbon-intensive grid can be a barrier. Environmental factors are increasingly important considerations for global manufacturers and mining companies who are facing pressure to green their supply chain. Adding solar can help to improve power reliability while supporting corporate sustainability targets. And Indonesia can leverage ongoing corporate demand to drive solar developments in Indonesia. Reforms such as looking at the power market design, liberalizing its electricity retail sector, or allowing access to PLN's grid for private power purchase agreement can help drive this segment. And that brings me to my last slide. So Indonesia's renewable energy target is ambitious, but it is achievable, and solar can help to achieve the 2025 renewable energy target and Indonesia's commitment under the Paris Agreement. But regulatory actions from the government needs to urgently follow the announced commitments to unlock Indonesia's solar potential and to bring investments into the country. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Caroline, for the insightful and optimistic presentation. I would like to invite all the participants here. If you have any question or clarifying comments to Caroline's presentation, to just leave them on the chat box, and our committee will regularly monitor the chat box to see how many questions are there and will relay them to Caroline. Caroline, just to bridge this to the next session, do you have somewhat a kicking statement from this report as a call for Indonesian stakeholder here?
Yeah, I think one thing that really stood out to us as we worked on the report and as we speak to stakeholders in the industry is that there is high interest in Indonesia's solar industry and solar market, both from domestic and international investors, as can be seen through the announced pipeline. And investors are eager to go in and help Indonesia build its solar industry, but they'll need support from the government to level the playing field and to help projects materialize. So I hope the government can take that into consideration.
Great. Yeah, I think we heard a lot that the signal for solar energy development in Indonesia is positive, with certain buts, and we expect that today's discussion will also bring what needs to be done in order to advance solar energy deployment in Indonesia. Once again, thank you, Caroline. I'll move on to our next job. So today we bring policymakers, utility, business players, and financing institutions to the table with us here today to discuss key policy support, also other supports necessary and measures in realizing Indonesia's vast solar energy potential, which is largely still untapped. The session will be moderated by Antoine Wagner-Jones from BloombergNEF. And Antoine, I will hand over the platform to you.
Thank you very much, Mauricia. Hello, everyone. It is wonderful to be here. We've had some great speakers. We have more great speakers as part of this panel. And I think what's been sort of shown so far is that this is a year which we're not just discussing things at a global level with COP26 coming up. It's actually a big year for Indonesia, where we're starting to broach new subjects that maybe haven't been mentioned, such as net zero being on the table, such as talking about coal in a different way, and again, with the upcoming revision of the country's energy roadmap really taking center stage. But we'll get to that in our panel. And before we go in, I'll just introduce our panelists. So we have a fantastic lineup. I thank you all for joining us here today. We have Zainal Arifin, who is the Executive Vice President of Engineering and Technology at PT-PNL, who will be giving a view of the country's state utility and how it is seeing the changes, interpreting what's going on, and planning, more importantly, a way in which ensuring that electricity is going to the population of Indonesia. We have Krisnawan Anditya, who is Director for Various and Renewable Energy at the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources. Thank you very much for joining us, giving us the policy-making perspective, which is incredibly important, as we've mentioned through our report. We have Sylvie J. Ghani, who is Director of Financing and Investment at PTSMI, who will be giving us a finance angle, which is, again, vital in terms of understanding exactly what's going on the ground. We need to have a diversity of perspectives, and PTSMI is one of the key organs through which financing can be spurred from the private sector and supported by the public sector. We have Femi Sastrena, who is Director of Planning and Business Development at Medco Energy. Again, it will be fantastically interesting to hear from his experience as a developer with a few projects, solar projects underway or completed. And finally, we have Daniel Kenyawan, who is solar analyst at IESR, who's been fantastically helpful in writing up this report. And again, will give us his perspective on the changes that we've seen in recent months and solar's potential in Indonesia the years ahead. So I'd like to start with Zainal, if possible. I think it'd be very interesting to see sort of where does solar fit in PNL's energy planning, and how has your view on its competitiveness maybe changed in recent months?
Yeah, hello. Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, dealing with the decarbonization, yeah, actually we PLN have presented a roadmap how PLN will achieve the carbon neutral in 2060 directly to the President of Indonesia, Pak Joko himself, at the presidential village on 11 May 2000 this year, 2021. The roadmap starts from the recent electricity consumption. Today it is 300 terawatt hours. The electricity supply still is dominated by fossil fuel, mostly coming from the 35 gigawatt project, with the capacity is 21 gigawatt, is equal to 120 terawatt hours. We estimate that energy production in 2060 will increase up to 1,800 terawatt hour. So there is a gap, 1,380 terawatt hour comparing to the recent consumption. This gap, 1,380 terawatt hour, equal to 230 gigawatt, we would like to fulfill with renewable energy. But we still have problem with our existing contract of IPP coming from the 35 gigawatt, mostly from a coal fire. So we have planning that the retirement of fossil will be started from 2030. And then they significantly decrease in 2040 following the end of their contract. The last generation nuclear power, we hope, can enter to Indonesia market in 2040 for providing a reliable baseload power generation. And the export of coal fire will be finished totally in 2056. Then we will totally energize with new and clean renewable energy at 2060. That's the roadmap we already presented to the President of Indonesia himself.
Thank you very much for that very comprehensive overview. We'll be coming back to some of those points, such as the IPP pipeline, for example, which is of particular interest in terms of understanding Indonesia's ability to procure new power. I'll switch to Kristawan from giving us the ministry's perspective on this. I think we've mentioned in the report and today a number of items on the regulatory agenda and on the policy agenda more broadly. So I'd like to put it to you, sort of what can we expect from Indonesia this year, sort of in the run-up to COP26? What sort of details can we understand right now in terms of the discussions that are ongoing and maybe changes to some of Indonesia's targets and ambition in terms of procuring renewable energy?
Well, thank you, Anthony, for your question to me related to how the situation of renewable energy in Indonesia, especially COP26 will be held in November in Glasgow, UK. So I will try to explain a little bit the situation of the energy in Indonesia. So, and then I will try to jump to how the Indonesian government will going to the net zero emission. As you may know that renewable energy share in national primary energy in 2020 is it was only 11.2%. And you already know that our ambitious renewable energy target is 23% by 2025. So considering the time is less than 5 years, and then we need to doubling in order to catch up our target, then what the government should do in order to meet this the target? Of course, we already have a very abundant of renewable energy potential resource, But considering the time, we need to expedite all the renewable energies that we have. But the promising one that we government see is solar. Why is the solar? Solar is what you call the potential is very abundant. Then the installation is very fast, only 12 until 18 months to be completed. And then the most important thing is the cost of the technology is already declined very, very rapidly. So this is the one why we are trying to boosting the renewable energy development with the priority is from solar. And how is the situation? For the midterm, until 2030, we are trying to develop massively solar power plant into 4 categories. One, we are trying to develop rooftop solar PV with the target is 3.6 gigawatt until 2025. The second, we are trying to deploy the big solar PV with the target 6.4. This is actually stated in the what you call the LPTL, the revised the LPTL, even though it's not yet finalized, still being discussed. But the number is at the moment is 6.4. And then we are trying to also deploy and develop the floating solar PV. We have a very abundant of the solar floating solar PV. If you are looking the existing reservoir and lake that we have, the total potential the floating solar PV can be developed is around 27 gigawatt. But if you are consider to address the intermittency, then we need to look at that floating solar PV need to be developed coexist with the hydro. Then the potential exists is around 12 gigawatts. So this is a big numbers, and we have proposed the solar PV to be developed in LPTLs of PLN, so be floating solar PV base. And the fourth one, for the outermost in isolated and the remote area, we are also trying to develop solar PV off grid. So this is the one that the package that we are trying to develop solar PV until 2030. And what is the what you call the planning of the Indonesia for going to the net zero emission? Actually, if you look at, we have already have a potential of geothermal, hydro, biomass, and so on, and all that the potential already being deployed. But the demand is very high. We expected until 2060, we need around 600 gigawatt, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, gigawatt. And one of the to fulfill that the demand, we need to put all of the renewable energy potential. Especially, we need to 100% renewable energy source in power generation by 2060, and this is most likely coming from the solar. Of course, some people are arguing that the solar PV is a intermittency. We need to address this kind of the issue. Then we need to also develop energy storage system, battery energy storage system. And in our planning, we expected that the battery storage energy system or energy storage system come from the pumped hydro storage. It can be developed in 2030, and in line with the increasing of the solar power development numbers of the capacity, then the numbers capacity of the energy storage and the renewable energy is increased. And back to your question, what the regulation need to be what you call give the impact to the development. So for rooftop solar PV, in order to deploy with the target 3.6 gigawatt, just for your information, currently we are now trying to finalize the ministerial regulation on rooftop solar PV. There are several changes under this regulation. For example, the export value to the PLN, the existing one is 65%. it will be increased 100%. And then the offset of the, what to call, if you have excess capacity, then you can export to the PLN, and within 6 months, it will be reset to zero. So this is already longer than the existing one, three months. And then there is also the possibility, the carbon trading with the people and then the PLNs. And this is just for the rooftop solar PV. For the others, big scale solar PV, we are now trying, also waiting to finalize the presidential regulation related to the new and renewable energy tariff, which is we expected it will be stipulated soon after the RPTLs of the PLN will be completed. And what is the main benefit of this presidential regulation? Actually, we are trying to propose 3 schemes of the tariff. One is the feed-in tariff. It will be applied for renewable energy with the capacity until 5 megawatts. The second one is feed-in ceiling price. So this will be applied for renewable energy with the capacity above 5 megawatt. And the third one is based on B2B or negotiation. This is only applied for renewable energy such as hydro for kickers, and then waste to power, and then the ocean energy, and so on. And there is some important things under this presidential regulation that will be attractive for the investor developer to invest in renewable energy in Indonesia, because under this regulation we have provide such as compensations. So if the electricity purchase selling price from the developers is higher than the generation cost of the PLN, the gap of this tariff will be provide money from the government to be given to the PLN. And during the COP26, we expected those regulations can be stipulated and will be announced by the president that Indonesia actually already starting to implement net zero emission through green renewable energy, green RPTLs, because you know the RPTL that we will revise is the composition power plant to be developed is heavy to the renewable energy sites. And in order to invite developer, investor to invest renewable energy development in Indonesia, then regulation that give the good climate investment is also will be stipulated soon. Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you very much, Krisnawan, and that was very thorough and comprehensive. And I think kind of gives us an idea of when we talk about building solar. Solar is a technology that can be built quickly at a low cost, and we've recognized that large volumes need to be installed in the short term. But I think what that just gave us was an impression of sort of how comprehensive an approach you need. So we need to be looking at different regulations. We need to be looking at putting up frameworks, whether it's feed-in tariffs, whether it's making sure B2B can work. And it also involves sort of looking at a range of options. So we have ground-mounted utility scale, but floating solar also is on the table and can help surmount some difficulties around land acquisition, for example. Decentralized solar is again another option, even though Indonesia is a country that's managed to electrify its population at an amazing speed over the previous decades. There is still a role to be played there in terms of providing decentralized source of electricity. I'll move it on to Sylvie from PTSMI. I think what would be very interesting to hear from you is what your role is in terms of supporting, what PTSMI's role is in terms of supporting and crowding in sort of private finance in renewable energy. I think what would be particularly interesting would be to hear sort of what types of projects, what types of assets are most attractive when we're looking at solar, what its role is from your perspective in the years to come.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I think the role of SMI here as a financial institution in the development of the renewable energy, especially for the solar, more to play at the later stage of this of the development is in the financing. But SMI not only providing financing facility, but also SMI could provide early stage support in the form of providing, for example, technical assistance or feasibility study in order to enhance the quality of the project preparation. So we at SMI has what we call it, has a platform that we call the SDG1, SDG Indonesia 1 or SIO, whereby PTSMI and the donor of this platform actually can provide several instruments to enhance the risk mitigation and also helping the gap of price through the technical assistance and grant facility, and also to help the project to achieve the targeted IRR, and also provide the sufficient margin for the lenders. I think, and also that our knowledge in renewable energy and our internal capacity could also help lenders to understand more about renewable project, especially for the new developer and new player. And of course, with this assistance, we hope that we can lowering the price of the loan to make it this more bankable and attract other lenders to participate in the project. I think some for SMI at the moment, because this is something the solar PV project probably for the local bank is still something new. To be frank, at the moment we don't have yet the project or the financing of the solar PV that has been closed or materialized yet. But yet we do have some pipeline that we are currently looking at and keen to actually close this by a few next months. But we are still discussing about the issue is about the business model of this solar PV. Most of this project is actually still serve for their own use, for their own group. And we don't have at the moment the project that actually will serve consumer or will be sell to the PLN yet. I think that's all from my side. Antoine.
That's very helpful. Thank you very much. And as we've said, we've in the report identified a pretty extensive series of projects, nearly 3 gigawatts of projects that are sort of in the pipeline. We need to find financing for, and that again is a place where organizations such as yours will play an incredibly important role. So thank you for that input. Now we have Femi on the line, and it would be great to get you to come in, and we've heard from policymakers, from PNL, from a range of perspectives, but I think what you offer is quite valuable insofar as Indonesia is a market that hasn't seen a large volume of investment in solar power compared to some of its neighbors, but we have seen a number of projects, and you've been involved in some of them. So what it'd be interesting to hear from you about is sort of lessons learned insofar as strategy on your side, but also maybe some observations that might help guide how we think about potential reforms and potential policy choices.
Yeah, thanks, Antoine. Good afternoon, everyone. I think before we start, as Antoine mentioned, so Medco Power has been quite busy in the space of the solar PV in Indonesia. In the past, we have been developed as a clean and renewable power company. We have 3,300 megawatt portfolio in 15 locations in Indonesia. And as of earlier this year, we're happy to inform that 1/3 of our electricity is produced from renewables. But of course, we're not going to stop here. We see that, I think, from the previous presenter, there's a lot of opportunities in terms of power demand, as well as the roles of the power, the renewable, particularly from the solar PV itself. So specifically in terms of the involvement, Medco Power is currently developing a captive solar PV for our facilities within the group. That's something that currently under construction. We work closely with Bu Sylvie and the SMI in terms of the financing of the project itself. I think so far so good, work in progress. Hopefully by first quarter next year, it's going to be in operation. The other one is we have been in discussion as well with PLN on the finalization of 2 PPA on the solar PVs. So that's currently underway as well. And I think in terms of opportunity, there's no doubt it's a big opportunities. I think we may start it late, but I think the question is how can we capitalize the opportunities going forward? I think that's the key one. From the perhaps the business point of view, what's really critical in order to get the good project in solar PV is probably on the planning itself. I think the preparation is start way before we develop the project. Basically, I think we know that renewables and also including the solar PV is spot location. So getting the right location in terms of matching between the demand and supply, and also getting the right irradiation ratios, and also land acquisition, I think will be very critical in terms of development of the solar PV project. Commercially, it's a lot of opportunities in terms of financing, as Bu Sylvie mentioned. I think on the not only from domestic bank, but also international and multilateral. So this is something that we can take advantage as well in order to make sure that the project remain feasible, but at the end it can produce the competitive tariff because of the competitive financing that we can take into advantage. So I think what's important on that part is probably more as a bankability of PPA. So we can make sure that the lenders is also comfortable with that, the project, and then we can work together hand in hand with the sponsor to realize and unlocking the opportunity in solar PV. I think that's all for the moment, Antoine. Thank you.
That's great. We'll circle back around to get some more details on that later. Daniel, I'd like to turn to you, and we just heard from Femi around tariffs and competitiveness of solar, and how and part of what we saw in the report was a pretty phenomenal decrease in the cost of procuring solar, as has been highlighted by Caroline in her presentation that she gave just earlier. Could you tell us a bit more about how competitive solar can be, what the sort of use cases are, and what its potential is for Indonesia?
Sure. Yeah, as Caroline mentioned earlier, the solar tariffs in Indonesia have declined by 76% from 25 cents per kilowatt hour back in 2015. That was actually the first ground-mounted solar in Kupang, Nusa Tenggara Timur, Eastern Nusa Tenggara, and have decreased to last year, actually in January, to Cirata floating solar of only 5.81 cents per kilowatt hour. And also more recently, last year, we were actually shocked to hear about the recent Indonesia auction, which was equity partner solar auction conducted by the Indonesia Power, the subsidiary of PLN, which received lower bids to below 4 cents. So I think the use cases are already here to below 4 cents. That was, although one might say that it's kind of like an outlier because it's maybe the developers have like a really strong very low financing cost to be able to bid that low. But I think the example is already here, and but I think I just want to highlight that probably the challenge is how to repeat the gigawatt deployments of solar, because all we've seen since 2017 until 2020, we only see 4 solar auctions being conducted, and most of them are relatively small in scale, only 25 megawatts, and the largest was Cirata with 145 megawatt AC. And the Indonesia solar auction was kind of a bit of a a good example for Indonesia, actually, that there were like 4 different projects being bundled into one. And the size was about 60 and 90 megawatt. And there was actually one solar plus storage project, which was about 100 megawatt and a 4-hour battery storage. So I think the challenge here is to really replicate this solar procurement. And I think we've seen the market signal is already sending us like a strong signal that it can be already cheap in Indonesia. But the question remains that how Indonesia can really move forward to not only meet renewable energy targets in 2025, but also to decarbonize the power system. And to that point, I just want to highlight that this year we've seen a lot of good pledges being made, net zero emission targets being discussed, coal moratorium, even PLN's carbon neutrality goal in 2060. But I think one thing that we're still missing is that we need to have a kind of sub-target for clean electricity generation. Like, for example, in the US, the Biden administration puts clean electricity standard, so 100% electricity in 2035 has to come from clean energy. And I think within the net zero emission goals, direction, and ambition, we really need to put these sub-targets to really be able to to move in the right direction. And so let's say if we want to have emissions peak at 2030, we really need to set a clear goal of how much solar generation would be in the generation mix. And for that, the numbers is actually only 0.2% today, with coal being 60% in the generation mix, and only less than 200 megawatt peak of installed solar capacity. So we really need to scale up this solar installed capacity by the for the next 5 years or so. And we've seen that the economics is already here, and that we really need to probably conduct a national solar procurement program. It could be a national solar program similar to India, but I think there might be some moving pieces that we need to, or in this case the government needs to plan forward, because we're still faced with overcapacity, mainly from coal, overbuilt for coal power plants. So yeah, that should be a challenge. And I think the government already knows about this trend. And based on Krishnawan's comments, that we've worked together quite often. So we know that, okay, the government already knows about this. So the real question is really how to untap this, this potential by moving the right pieces to really enable, a gigawatt scale of solar deployment. I think that's it for now.
That's great, and that's given us a lot to go back to, and I think I'd like to react to one of the comments just about the coal moratorium. Before I do so, we'll be switching to questions in around 10 minutes, everyone. So we'll be taking questions from the audience. So please feel free to write in the chat, whether it's an open question for all the participants or whether it's for someone in particular. Again, I'd like to ask you, Zainul, from PLN's perspective. I think we've just heard from Daniel about how the economics of solar are improving, how it is an increasingly attractive proposition, but one of the barriers to deployment is the oversupply situation that we've seen in terms of capacity being procured. We've already mentioned, you mentioned in your opening comments, IPP payments and the need to balance future procurement with that. And that's very interesting, because over the recent months, we've started hearing talk around a coal moratorium. So how has that changed? What does that involve, and how might that change the case for solar over the next, say, decade?
Yeah, we have to realize that the overcapacity, mostly coming from the IPP coal-fired power plant, is our main challenging issue, our main handicap for developing renewable energy in Indonesia. Indeed, we are not happy with this condition. With overpaid, underutilized of electricity, we have to pay unused energy due to the take-or-pay clause based on the capacity payment contract. We already suffering for that. Our financial is bleeding. And the main problem with over capacity, with over 10,000 megawatt unused energy right now, we have difficulty how and where we put the renewable energy to the grid or our energy market. Yeah. On the other hand, we have high intention to reduce the fossil fuel energy. But at the same time, we should still consider the law, the legal aspect. We should respect our commitment legally. We cannot stop the contract related to the 35 gigawatt project. So this year, the last IPP of 35 gigawatt will be executed. But next year, we already confirmed to stop the new coal-fired construction. We don't want to develop coal-fired in Indonesia anymore. Based on that legal issue, so why the phase out of the coal-fired power plant in Indonesia little bit late. The retirement of fossil fuel can be start from 2030, and the phase out of coal-fired power plant will finish totally in 2056. That's the effect of the overcapacity to the developing of renewable energy in Indonesia. So little bit late, yeah, for integrating the renewable energy to the grid for our energy market.
Absolutely, and that's very interesting. And again, this is an overcapacity situation that varies enormously depending on the grid, what islands we're talking about, what grid we're talking about. But the idea of trying to rein in procurement of new fossil fuel fired capacity is one that does make sense when we look forwards. I'd like to turn back to our to Pak Krisnawan from the ministry. We've heard from Daniel about maybe the benefits of having a national procurement program put in place and have that as a driver for competitively sourcing new capacity. Maybe it'd be interesting, rather than ask you sort of around the ministry's plans already, which you've done a great job of explaining, it would be perhaps worthwhile sort of asking you, are there any case studies, are there any lessons that you've learned by watching other transitions elsewhere in the world? Are there any countries that are particularly interesting or where we might be able to replicate their experiences in Indonesia? I think you might be muted. Apologies.
Sorry. Thank you, Anthony, for your question. So, well, actually, we are looking all the situation in globally, the energy transition in other countries, especially in our neighborhood countries, in ASEAN members. Related to the solar development, one of the lessons learned that we are trying to see is from the Vietnam, as Caroline already also explained in her presentations, that within 2 years, Vietnam utility companies and government together can deploy almost 19 gigawatts of solar PV. And half of them is come from the rooftop solar PV. So this is also one of the case that we are looking and learn and trying to also to replicate. Even though the numbers, the target of the solar PV development is so not too high, it is because we are also consider the situation of the PLN, which is related also has a burden because the oversupply. That's why the government trying to only setting the development rooftop solar PV is only 3.6 gigawatts until 2025. This is the one, the idea that the government already considered the situation of the PLN. But the other side is, all the development of renewable energy actually depend on the RPTLs of the PLN. And many people also asking why the RPTL is take too long to be completed and to be to be implemented. It is because, you know, this is the right time that the government see the energy transformation of the energy, or the transition of the energy should be implemented. That's why we are expected that the new RPTL that will be stipulated by the minister should be different with the previous one, which is the previous one. If you look at in the document RPTL 2019, most likely the share, the power generation to be developed is heavy to the fossil power plant. But in new RPTLs, you can see the numbers of renewable energy in total additional power generation to be developed is most likely higher than the fossil power generation that will be developed. So then this is also will be given the message during the COP26 and during the presidency of the Indonesia in next year in 2020, that Indonesia actually starting not only talking about the policy, not only saying the target, but also trying to be implemented this the policy, our regulation into the RPTS of the PLN. That's my comment at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pak Kuswan. Pak Femi, it would be interesting to hear again from you, to bring you back in. I mean, we've heard about sort of policy ambitions, about what's going on in terms of the wider context. But again, it might be interesting just to hear from your experiences on the ground. I think one of the things that's talked about quite often is the development of a local value chain in terms of manufacturing various components or equipment for solar power, or just having the expertise required to develop projects. How is that changing? And what are we seeing in terms of areas that have grown and areas where more can be done?
Yeah, thanks for that, Antoine. I think value chain will be obviously very, very critical and very important to support the development on solar PV in Indonesia. Yeah, I think we have seen that in terms of target expectation in relatively short time frame, I think that is quite ambitious, and it needs a lot of collaboration. Basically, I think it has to strike the balance basically at the end in terms of how we can achieve that kind of a target, and how at the same time later on how the overall value chain can grow also to support and grow even further. I think maybe knowing that this is still in the early stages of the sectors, early stages of development, particularly Indonesia, there is it may need some sort of a different consideration. Basically, I mean, just to have a contrast is with the oil and gas sector, for example, where maybe there's an overall value chain is already established and there to support. So this is something that can be, of course, there is a lot of area, a lot of room to grow. I think it should be go hand in hand, basically, and overall, I mean, to support the overall growth from the regulators, and then PLN on the other side, and then the private sectors, and then also all the value chain to support all the growth. That's all, Anthony.
Thank you, Pak Femi. That was very helpful. I think this is the time where we'll switch to questions. We have a number that have come in, and please feel free to jump in at any point to answer. But maybe I'll first turn to you, Sylvie. We have a question coming from Malaysia, and they're asking, how do private and foreign IPPs start the process to apply to build a large solar plant in Indonesia? If we could have a bit of information about that, that could be useful. I think we have a lot of potential investors, a lot of potential project partners on the line. So just some clarity there would go a long way.
Sorry, is it question?
So if I could address that question to Sylvie, if you're happy to take that, and I'm happy to repeat it if necessary.
Sorry, can you repeat the question, please?
No problem. We've got a question that's coming from Malaysia, and it's just asking, how do IPPs, especially private IPPs, foreign IPPs, start a project to apply to build a large solar plant in Indonesia, and maybe as well focus on sort of the considerations around how they can have access to finance, what sort of tools are available to facilitate their entry into the Indonesian market.
Okay, thank you. It's I think the finance for renewable energy nowadays is not an issue. Most of the bank, if I cannot say all, has the same interest to support the renewable energy development. The only issue is only the ticket size of the lenders and also the scale of the project. So so it will determine who is the proper lender for this project. For the large size of the large project size, for example, given that the most renewable energy is actually funding needs is in US dollar, so there will be limited US dollar funding locally. So you have to consider the offshore lenders also for the large ticket size. And the larger the project is, the longer the tenor. So for the commercial bank is also, there is a limited appetite for the commercial bank to lend for the longer tenor. So this is the role of the export credit agency, multilateral, or the financial institutions such as SMI, who is has the mandate to support the infrastructure development, could play a role. But for the small scale or small size of project, I think most of the local bank now is able to lend to this project. Hope this can answer, Antoine.
No, absolutely. Thank you. We've got a question for Daniel that's come in. According to the explanation that we've heard, solar cells are superior to other energy, so solar power is superior to other technologies. India has the potential for it. So then for remote areas that do not have a supply of electricity, is Indonesia ready for comprehensive energy distribution? So what kind of infrastructure is available or required? And in terms of maintenance of the equipment, if they are far from the center. So this is something that we've heard in terms of developing projects in remote regions that can dramatically increase project costs, and the lack of infrastructure is a challenge, but maybe also an opportunity. But I'll let you take it from here.
Right. Well, first off, I don't think we can think of that as superior to other technologies, because, I mean, we need to kind of utilize anything that we have at hand. I mean, I don't like the idea that we can solve anything with just one technology, in this case solar, even though I am involved in like solar cell research since like way back. But yeah, so to that point, I just want to clarify that. And I think for remote areas, I think the challenge is to really about logistics and really about finding the resources that we might have locally. I mean, solar, generally speaking, solar is the easiest because you can just put it anywhere. And typically in Indonesia, you know, the eastern side has largest, you know, more sunnier than in the rest of the western part. So that's a plus in terms of resources. But yeah, I think when it comes to distributed or decentralized off-grid mini grids application, I think maintenance is still seen largely as an issue, because usually they are only financed with like a state budget, and then when there's like transfer to the local village or something, they lack kind of the technical knowledge to really repair the power plant usually, and then they don't know really how to find, you know, the operations and maintenance side of things to where they can find the suppliers, for instance. So that might remain a challenge. We've visited one kind of isolated island before, and we've seen that it was actually built back in 2009, I believe, but now it's not working anymore. And at the time, I believe solar panels was still very expensive, probably more than $2 a watt, which now declined to 25 cents a watt. So yeah, that might still be a challenge for remote areas, but I think once we can grow a more local kind of a manufacturing, we might be able to solve that as the demand grows, so that more people can have like a I think it's very underutilized today. So yeah.
Great, that's very helpful. We have a question that's come in for Caroline, if I can bring you back in, if you're on the line. We have data showing that the Indonesian electricity tariff per kilowatt hour is cheaper than in Vietnam. And pushing PV in Indonesia will help Indonesia increase it, or should Indonesia increase tariff levels to make PV plants more economical? So I think this is about the correlation between, so Indonesia retail tariffs are generally quite low, and there's a risk of that, and the relationship between raising tariffs and the economics of PV.
Yeah, thanks, Antoine. Just to clarify that there are actually separate concepts. And to go back, Indonesia's electricity retail tariffs are highly regulated right now, and they are subsidized. So that means that the PLN is actually dependent on subsidies from the government in order to cover their cost of supply. So with industrial and commercial
there are lots of foreign investors interested in Indonesia. We're unsure what programs are available to apply for. Are we talking about auctions or tenders, or direct negotiations with private developers? If you could just briefly explain sort of the frameworks that are involved in developing projects and what's available.
Is that for Caroline, or?
That's for Caroline, and anyone else who wants to jump in afterwards.
Okay, maybe I can jump in later after you, Caroline. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So for my understanding right now, if we're looking at PLN's concession area, PLN will be the only off-taker in the country, and they do run procurement programs, tenders that they invite the developers who are on this list, the pre-selected investors list, the DPT list, to participate in. So registering and qualifying to be on the PLN's DPT list would be the first step. And in areas that are outside of PLN's concession area, there will be licensed electricity business suppliers that can actually build captive plants to supply to industrial estates and things like that. So for example, one of the proposed projects, the Sunseed floating PV project, that's with PT PLN Batam. So directly with the electricity supplier authorized to sell electricity in that particular area. Daniel, do you have anything to add to this?
Yeah, I think it's already very clearly, comprehensively explained by Caroline, but I just want to highlight that that's actually the issue that we're currently having. We don't really have like a clear procurement program for the next like 3 to 5 years. Like even with REPTL being finalized, there's still kind of a little bit of an uncertainty, like whether that project will eventually be auctioned. So which really stressed or underlines the importance of having a systematic solar procurement. But then again, we have to solve a lot of different pieces out there, with the overcapacity. And I think if let's say hypothetically, if we are not in this overcapacity situation, it would be rather easy to just plan the next 5 years that we're going to have like 5 gigawatts of utility scale solar, 1 gigawatt each, right? So I think that could be an issue. And to that point, actually project development in forms of like developing feasibility studies and finding the lands could be really helpful for as Bu Sylvie mentioned earlier, when it comes to the actual auction being held. So I think the government can really help prepare those kind of pre-developed projects before they are actually being auctioned, supposing we manage the overcapacity issues. So yeah. And also to that, just one more thing, standards of the PPAs can also be very helpful in like enabling further like faster deployment, because we've seen that negotiations of PPA can take kind of a long time, 2 years, as we've seen in Bali. So I think that could be one of the necessary reforms that we need to see in the next year or two
Great, thank you to both of you. I think that's
Sorry,
where
Anthony.
Yes,
if I may add, yes, related to the procurement, actually, we are already streamlining the procurement process. Before, the only one is the auctions, but now there are two mechanisms for the tender. One is the direct selection, and the second one is direct appointee. So, of course, the developers who like to joining the project under the LPTS or PLN, they need to register in the PT of the PLN. So that's the one to check whether the bankability or the reputation of the company to participation is quite good enough to make sure that the one, if they are winner the project, then they will execute and implement it the project as a target of COD as a plan. This is the scheme, and you may just the existing regulation is a ministerial regulation number 4/2020. One of the issue in that regulation before is BOT. This is the one of also issue the reluctance of developers or investors to making investment in Indonesia. But now, since ministerial regulation number 4/2020, then there is some the BOT is not as an obligation. It depends of the PLN proposed or based on the negotiations, and we expect it. And somebody asking also how was the tariff? The tariff is already also set up in the ministerial regulation number 4/2020. So actually using the ceiling price, depend of the renewable energy type that will be developed. One of them will be 100% of DPP or generation cost of the PLN, or 85%. But once presidential regulation stipulated, then it will be a proposed three scheme for the tariff. So this is the one that I would like to give the information. And even though your project is not yet listed in LPTLs of the PLN, as long as you already registered as a DPT of the PLN and you have a project in the other side, then the PLN will be trying to offer. So, for example, if there is a project A will be auction, then all the DPT, all the developer has a DPT can be participated. And related to the wind and solar, there will be quotas capacity, and we are now trying to talk with the PLN to discuss and to determine the quotas for solar PV and wind power for offering to the developer after the LPTL will be stipulated or published. That's the additional information. And the other scheme that also is one opportunity for the private sector to participate, as Caroline already mentioned and Daniel, is a PPU. PPU is a private public utilities. This is similar with the PLN. They are not only develop power generation, but also develop the transmission, distribution, and selling directly to the end user in one special business area. Just for information, until now, there are 43 PPUs already established, already have a permit. But considering the situations of the PLN, the government is very, very carefully now to give the permit for the PPU. This is the additional information to the.
That's very helpful for context. I think what that underlines is that some of the frameworks that are in place, but also that things are being discussed, whether it's by PLN and the ministries, and these frameworks are also changing. So it's what our report, and please, I direct you also to read the report if this is of particular interest, where we outline what the concrete opportunities are, and really it serves as an identifier of the potential that Indonesia has, but also an introduction to the market for investors who are interested in perhaps making an entry or putting their money into solar assets in particular. So I think in this, to summarize very briefly, I think what this panel has been effective at doing is giving an impression of sort of the potential, the massive potential that Indonesia has in terms of dramatically growing its installed solar capacity, the role of investors, whether it's foreign or domestic investors. We've also had a lot of information about how things work on a concrete level in terms of financing opportunities, in terms of support. So hopefully that was helpful. And overall, I think this is just an opportunity again to mark out that this is a year at which we're really seeing progress in terms of discussions and in terms of ambition in Indonesia. So thank you, everyone. Thank you to our esteemed panelists for taking the time and for sharing their thoughts. And again, thank you to Bloomberg Philanthropies and IESR. So I'll switch back to Marlistia.
Right. Thank you, Antoine. And I observe that we have homeworks to do, but also opportunities to seize. And I hope that this event and this report will hopefully serve as the kick we need to jumpstart solar energy deployment in Indonesia. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, to conclude this event, I would like to invite Fabi Tumiwa, the Executive Director of IESR, back to deliver his closing remarks and officially launch our report.
Thank you, Chitra. Thank you very much for all panelists, Antoine, Caroline, Daniel, Pak Krisnawan, Pak Sainal, Bu Sylvie, and Pak Femi for your excellent thought and contributions to the discussion. We know that Indonesia has a big potentials of solar. As indicated in this report, we can actually state it that 18 gigawatt could be developed. However, it requires a number of reforms as highlighted also in this report. We have to make sure that this capacity could be added in the next coming years toward 2025. And that requires us a very good planning. It has to be integrated in RUPTL, which current RUPTL, hopefully, if I'm not mistaken, will be well in the making. And from the number that we saw, that there's increasing number of solar compared to 2019 RUPTL, but still less than 18 gigawatt. But in addition to that, I think in addition to RUPTL, as also Pak Chris mentions, the other utilities that own business concessions area that also plan to increase renewable, in particular solar. I think that's also could contribute to this size. In addition to that, there's a couple of reform in terms of regulation that needs to be taken by governments, and we would like to offer our assistance also to speed up the reforms of this. I have to also announce that we in IESR and hopefully with our partners that we plan to continue to have discussions after this launch report. So we are going to have we are going to contact you again to discuss some of this recommendation, how we can put it forward, not just recommendation, but really put that into the actions. And we hope to host what we call Indonesia Solar Summit sometimes in October. So I hope I can see you all again in this Indonesia Solar Summit. In October, you will get further announcements, I think, about these events. So we are very excited with this report, and hopefully it really it can contribute to the advancements of solar energy development in Indonesia to support not only renewable energy target, but to support the effort to decarbonize our energy system by 2060 or sooner. Well, we in IESR, we always see 2060 is too long, 2050. But we know that a solar could play a very, very significant role in that journey. Thank you very much for all participants to this launching event. And with that, I would like to close. And I'm proud to launch this joint Bloomberg New Energy Finance and IESR Solar in Indonesia Reform and Opportunity Report. Thank you.
Right. The report is available for download on BloombergNEF and IESR website. The link will be provided in the chat box. And on behalf of Bloomberg Philanthropies, BloombergNEF, and IESR, I thank you all for tuning in and giving us your comments and insight. Follow us on our social media channels for more updates, and see you at the next event. Bye-bye.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Recording stopped.